Hey guys, can somebody put in the chat or the question box um, that you can hear me or you can't hear me? Awesome. Thanks. I'm so used to Zoom calls now. It's weird not seeing anybody. I assume you can also see my screen. You can see the presentation up. Is that right? Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Tony. All right, guys, we'll wait another minute or two. Okay, so why not get started, right? So welcome to the webinar tonight. I will try and keep an eye on the question box. So type in questions anytime you have them. I will certainly answer them all at the end, and if I happen to see them when we are in the middle of the presentation, I'll try and give them an answer as well. This is being recorded. Wait a minute. Yes, I just wanted to confirm that. It's always not too fun when you have to do the webinar over because you forgot to hit the record button. So this is being recorded. So if you want to listen to it again, we'll have it up on the website for you to do so. So tonight is all about sports nutrition, fact or fiction. I'll just introduce myself a little. My name is Beth Peterson. I have been a registered dietitian for over 20 years now, which makes me feel old. And I've worked in all sorts of capacities when it comes to nutrition. Obviously now I am a dietitian for the Core Diet. And I've also been an athlete for actually far longer than I've been a dietitian. I have done marathons and ultra type events, mountain bike racing, swim events, obviously triathlon. I raced as a pro in triathlon long course racing for 6 or 7 years. So all this to say that I've been around the block a few times, both in the nutrition world and in the endurance sport world. So yeah, and I've been working with athletes for quite some time now. when it comes to dialing in their nutrition, whether it be race fueling or everyday eating, so that they can maximize their performance. So that's a little bit about me. Let's get rolling on this actual presentation. Okay, so basically how this webinar came about is we asked on our social media, what kind of questions do you have about sports nutrition? In addition to that, the dietitians that work for the Core Diet, we obviously get the same questions, the same few questions over and over again. So some of these questions are, kind of just based on what we get asked a lot. Some questions unfortunately didn't make the cut, so I apologize if you asked a question and it's not on here. I just really talk way too much about everything, so I had to cut down the questions some, just because, for the sake of time, actually. And I will say one of those questions, my husband, he submitted, and that question was, fact or fiction, do Pop-Tarts really have real fruit filling in them? So the answer to that is no. Actually, they might, I don't know, but his question did not make the cut. So here are the questions we're going to look at tonight. So without further ado, let's get rolling on question number 1. Okay. Something we get asked extremely often about at the Core Diet is a low carb approach to fueling. Does it work? Is it a viable option for endurance athletes? Fact or fiction? And so first, this first consideration certainly goes towards low carb approach to fueling, but it actually applies to all the questions that we're going to talk about tonight. And I just want to kind of get this out of the way. It's very important that you guys know that, there's a very important consideration of what type of athlete are we talking about. So I know that nutrition can be very confusing because there's all sorts of information out there. You read in one magazine this, and then a very contrary thing you read on the web in this blog, and it gets super confusing and people get really bogged down. One thing you really have to pay attention to, though, is what type of athlete or person is the writing or the webinar or whatever talking about. Obviously we have on one extreme end the elite athlete, somebody trying to qualify for the Olympics or, win Kona or win the Boston Marathon. And then on the other end, we have somebody, for lack of a better term here, I use couch potato, but basically somebody that doesn't necessarily have performance in mind. They're just trying to get off the couch and get moving. And maybe weight loss is the goal. Most of us exist somewhere in between those two extremes. When I am speaking tonight, I am talking about the somewhere in between. And that somewhere in between is really anybody with a performance-minded goal. And that doesn't mean that the goal has to be an elite goal, like, qualify for Boston Marathon or qualify for Kona. Those are what I would consider elite type performance goals. The goal could be to run a 6-hour marathon. The goal could be to do my first ever mountain bike race. The goal could be to, finish my first sprint triathlon. The goal could be to qualify for Kona, but the point is that I'm speaking to people who have performance in mind, and they're wanting to fuel and eat so that they can support that performance. That's very different than somebody that is wanting to do some exercise so that they can lose some weight. We're talking about people wanting to perform. So one fueling approach does not fit all sizes. And I think I belabored this point enough, so we'll move on. All right, so low carb approach to fueling. Basically, there are two different ways to approach fueling or opposing theories. And so first, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the two different ways to think about it. The most accepted and historically the approach that athletes have used is the high carbohydrate approach. This is basically fueling with carbohydrate, simple carbohydrate. And the reason why it's the most accepted and historically the approach that athletes take is that it's basically because many, like there could be lots of manys in that first point. Studies support that carbohydrate during exercise works. So basically, tons of studies, tons of evidence to support that carbohydrate during exercise will improve endurance capacity. It will make us perform better. That carbohydrate intake during exercise will reduce overtraining on consecutive days of hard training. So in other words, if we take in carbohydrate, we recover better. And also that carbohydrate intake during training plays a very important role in immunity. And that mechanism there is that it positively affects gut microbia. The little microbes, the little bugs in our gut play a huge role in immunity, and carbohydrate basically positively affects those guys. So lots of evidence to show that we will perform better, have better endurance capacity, we will recover better, and our immune systems do better if we take carbohydrate in. Furthermore, we know that carbohydrate is the main source of fuel at higher intensities. You've all seen those charts where at super low intensity, there's basically on one axis fat utilization and carbohydrate utilization, and then on the other axis, intensity. And as when the intensity is really low, some carbohydrate is used, but primarily it's fat. And then as the intensity increases, it's not too long before carbohydrate takes over, and carbohydrate is the main source of fuel, to the point where at the highest intensities, only carbohydrate is used. So basically that's a very clear, again, a very clear physiological mechanism. Our body wants carbohydrate. Okay, so that's the high carbohydrate approach. That's kind of the theory behind using it. The opposing theory is basically existing in some state of low carbohydrate or insufficient carbohydrate availability. So in other words, you're not taking in enough carbohydrate to support the demand. Oftentimes this is matched with a high fat diet. So high fat, low carbohydrate, or you'll see it a lot of times in the literature is HFLC. So that's the abbreviation referring to high fat, low carbohydrate approach. And the whole idea here is, again, we are training in some state of low availability for carbohydrate. We're not meeting the demand. How is this accomplished? In a variety of ways. Oftentimes you'll see how athletes, how it's recommended to do it is to do workouts in the morning without eating anything. So you fasted all night. You don't eat anything when you get up. You go and do your workout. And so obviously you're, fasted for that workout, not taking in any carbohydrate during a workout. So maybe taking in water or electrolyte, but not taking any carbohydrate during a workout. Another relatively common way you'll see this done is if you do 2 workouts a day, perhaps the first workout is fueled, but then in between the 2 workouts, you wouldn't take any carbohydrate in. Instead, you'd focus on eating higher fat foods, protein, and then that second workout would be basically in a state of low carbohydrate availability. So that's basically how this approach is achieved. Um, so the whole idea with this is if we eat a diet high in fat and low in carbohydrate, our bodies will eventually adapt and become better at oxidizing fat. Um, that then makes us less reliant on carbohydrate as fuel. And so we don't need to take as much carbohydrate in. We do better at using our fat stores. And we all know that we have ample amount of fat stored in our system to, provide a lot of calories, basically. So there are definitely studies that show that this adaptation occurs. We know that if we don't take carbohydrate in, we take in fat, we exercise or we train in that state, our body does, get better at using fat. But here's where the issue lies with this approach, in my mind. There aren't many studies that actually show the usefulness of this adaptation to performance. So, in other words, the adaptation occurs, but that doesn't actually translate into better performance. And remember, I'm talking to a bunch of people that have performance minded goals. And so if you're looking at this from a dietitian's perspective or from an athlete's perspective that wants to perform better, this isn't necessarily a great option that we know of, basically. So there are short duration studies that show no changes in performance or a decrease in performance. And then longer duration studies that look at performance, but at extremely low intensities, like you're going to go out and do a recovery run. How do you perform on that recovery run in having adapted to this low carbohydrate approach? Well, that's not, in my mind, that useful because that's never going to be a race-like condition. We perform at higher intensities in racing. So that's kind of the story with a high fat, low carbohydrate approach. A few other important considerations. So a few kind of other reasons or things to think through when you're trying to evaluate if this would be a good option or not. Your gut, for the most part, adapts to what you train it with it. So if you train with high carbohydrate and a high fat, low carbohydrate approach, carbohydrate transporters, so basically the little guys that help digest the sugars that you take in, will downregulate. Your gut says, hey, we're not doing this anymore, so we don't need all these transporters to get sugar into the system. But the problem with that is if you go then to take carbohydrate, you actually suffer a lot of GI issues. And this is kind of one of the very real problems that we see in actuality when people do this. So the whole idea is that, and you'll often see this with the high fat, low carbohydrate approach, is that you train low. It's kind of the same idea as training at altitude, only opposite. You train low, you train with low carbohydrate, and you race high, meaning you train with very little carbohydrate availability so that you can get these adaptations. But then when it comes to racing, we know we need carbohydrate. So we know it helps with performance. So you take carbohydrate in the racing. Well, the problem with that is you haven't trained with carbohydrate to get that gut ready for carbohydrate. And so one, very real kind of outcome that I see when people use this approach is that when they go to race, they have GI issues. Their body the GI doesn't want to take all that carbohydrate in. So kind of in summary, we know carbohydrate works. We know it improves performance. We know it improves recovery. We know it supports immune function. So basically, if you have a performance goal in mind, our recommendation from a core diet standpoint is that you race. You're going to train with carbs and you're going to race with carbs. You'll have better workouts because your workouts will be fueled well. You will likely have better recovery because you will have, replaced your glycogen stores, and you'll likely have a much better supported immune system. So those are our reasons. That's kind of my the conclusion that we've come to. If you do want to try the low carbohydrate, high fat approach to improve fat oxidation, I would do so when you're training at low intensities, when your stress level overall is relatively low. I wouldn't do it, on back-to-back workouts or, back-to-back days. I would maybe pick, 1 or 2 days a week where you might do a fasted workout, something like that. But not within, the frame of time where you're really trying to perform well and train well, because you're within, a 16 to 20 week time frame of racing. So carbs all the way, before working out, during training, and after for recovery, which, I'll just add this in. It's not on a slide, but basically, people then say, okay, well, how much carb are we talking about? That's kind of an important, conversation to have as well. Again, I can get talking a little bit too much about this, and it goes over the scope of what we're trying to discuss, but I'll add this in anyway. When you're thinking about carbohydrate for fueling, you want to keep the carb sources simple as possible. You want to mix carbohydrate sources, so fructose, glucose, dextrose, maltodextrins, those types of things, because no singular source of sugar can be absorbed at greater than 60 grams per hour. But when you mix the sources, you can get that absorption rate up much higher, many more grams per hour when you mix the sources. So that's why we mix sources. And most sports nutrition products know this, have for some time. And so they have mixed sugars in the same product. If less than 30 minutes, carbohydrate not necessarily needed. If 45 to 75 minutes with intensity in training and racing, carbohydrate can definitely help performance. Even a carb rinse in your mouth can work. 2 hours in that time range, we're talking about 60 grams per hour. And then anything over 2.5, we're talking 90 grams an hour or more. Basically, in those situations where you have those very long type races, marathons, long course triathlon, that type of thing, the more the better. So the more you can get in there and get that gut adapted to taking as much carbohydrate as possible, the better the performance outcome will be. Okay, so that kind of nicely segs us into our next question, which is weight loss. When should I do it? How should I do it? How does this occur? If you want me to eat all these carbs in training before, during all this sugar, during, after, how the heck am I supposed to get to an ideal weight? Furthermore, when should I lose weight? Should I do it in when I'm in the race season? Should I do it in the off season? When am I trying to accomplish this? And of course, again, the same question we bring it up. What type of athlete are we talking about? One weight loss approach does not fit all sizes. So let's look at that a little bit first when we're talking about weight loss. For the elite athlete that has had a high training stress throughout the season and has raced at a low body weight, or an ideal, a quote unquote ideal racing weight, which is oftentimes not an ideal body weight, it's an ideal racing weight. Those people, and when I say elite athlete, I don't mean like they have to be trying to qualify for the Olympics in this situation. I just mean anybody really that has done, for example, multiple marathons in a year, multiple Ironmans in a year, has had big weeks of training for much of the year, then should they try and maintain that low body weight or use the off season to lose weight or get down even further? Of course not. Those types of athletes that have put a lot of stress on their body need to use the off season to replenish. They need to use the off season to actually gain a little bit of weight and get their hormone levels back to normal, that type of thing. Of course, on the other end of the spectrum is the couch potato, and weight loss is ideal at any time. I mean, that's oftentimes the person just trying to get off the couch and get moving. That is their main kind of motivation, is I want to lose weight. So any time is a good time for them. Somewhere in between, which is where most of us live. Kind of two different situations. If needing to lose a significant amount of weight, getting a head start in the off season, or focusing on not gaining further weight during what is usually the holiday season is a good idea. So, off season can be definitely used to focus on nutrition, focus on getting some of the weight off, focusing on not gaining further weight. Otherwise, if you're not somebody that needs to lose a significant amount of weight, like, oh, I generally, race at 150 pounds. Right now, I'm about 155, 156. Then the off season might, again, be a good time to relax, replenish. Don't worry necessarily about, losing weight or whatever, but just kind of, again, relax and wait until during the season, to get down to that race weight. Okay. The question, this is kind of goes part and parcel with this whole thing, is can I lose weight when I'm training hard? And I see this question answered in a bunch of different ways. No, you should only try and lose weight in the off season. Once you start training hard and you're getting ready to race and you're in the midst of racing, then you can't lose any weight. That will negatively affect training and racing and blah blah blah. So I'm here to say that you can definitely lose weight during a racing season. You can definitely lose weight, obviously assuming that you have a weight to lose during training hard. But you just have to be mindful of those workout windows so that you don't negatively affect training. And this kind of ties into the last question of, we're going to eat carbohydrate before working out. So that's that pre-workout fueling, even when you're trying to lose weight. And this is oftentimes where the low carbohydrate approach comes up. Hey, I'm going to skimp a little on the carbohydrates during training, or I'm going to fast before my workouts during training because I'm trying to lose weight. Opposite. We're going to do the opposite of that. Because again, we just talked about, if you train and race in the state of low carbohydrate availability, you're hurting the workout performance. You are negatively affecting your recovery, and you're possibly, hurting taking a hit to your immune system. So we don't want to do those things. This is how you cut back when you are training hard. You always still do pre-workout fueling. This is, somewhere between 20 to 40 grams of carbohydrate within 30 to an hour of doing your workout. You always fuel during workouts. No compromises there. So no, I won't have 2 or 3 gels during my bike ride. I'll get by without them. So that, later on I can have pizza. Nope, that's not how it works. Unfortunately, I wish that was how it works, because I'd get to eat a lot more pizza in my life. But our body needs the fuel during the workouts, not, at 8 p.m. at night when you're on the couch sitting there watching TV and eating pizza. You want to feed your body when it's doing the work. That's how you are going to accomplish weight loss when you are training hard and not negatively affect the actual training. And then you always do post-workout recovery. We'll talk a little bit about recovery in one of the next questions, but you never skimp on those things. So here are the kind of the windows. Again, same idea. Always doing pre-workout, always doing during, always doing that recovery drink or that recovery meal. Um, Post workout, kind of a window of opportunity where you could still have some grains potentially. Even skipping that post workout window in terms of grains if you are trying to lose weight. Here's the thing, here's where the weight loss part of it comes in. During the rest of the day, when you're not, working out, so not those windows of time surrounding workouts, that's when you're focusing on um, fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, low fat dairy, potentially nuts, seeds, legumes, all those really nutrient dense foods, um, but also lacking, not on that list, for example, is grains, simple sugars, that type of thing. So, extremely, extremely common when I'm looking at a food log of an athlete that's trying to lose weight. Do the workout in the morning. Don't eat anything before the workout. Do the workout. Maybe take a gel or a little sports drink, but not nearly enough to support the actual activity. After that workout, I'm gonna keep that metabolism burning high, and I don't want to replace those calories because this is where I'm gonna lose my weight. That's a very common thing that I hear. And then, maybe pretty good for lunch. So eat a salad, or eat some good in their mind, quote unquote, good lunch that's, I mean, perhaps low in calories, vegetables, fruit, that type of thing. And then basically starting to really struggle through the afternoon into the evening with the, basically getting so hungry or really craving sugar or grains, that type of thing. And so what happens is they go home and with all intentions of, having some grilled chicken and, some side of broccoli, instead, end up with half a pizza, because they were just overwhelmed with hunger and really craving that type of thing. Now, that is a very, very common scenario that I see, that we as dietitians see. Now, basically, what we're going to do is turn that around. Here's an example of a day where we do this the proper way, so that your workouts aren't negatively affected, but we're still, cutting calories in some sense and achieving some weight loss healthfully. Okay, so we wake up, have that pre-workout fueling. So some kind of grain. It could be a banana, it could be toast, it could be a waffle, that type of thing. Then going and doing the workout. And just in this example, I have a long run in there. We're using Gatorade Endurance. We're using 3 gels. We're using, as you can see, 104 grams of carbohydrate in this 2.5-hour run. So, that's a little low on the scale of grams of carbohydrate per hour for this particular run, but it's also a run versus a bike, so we have to tolerate it, that type of thing. After the workout, even more simple sugars and some protein in the recovery. In this example, we use Clean Recovery, a formulated recovery drink. And then after the workout, we're still within that. The recovery is within a half an hour of finishing, and then we're on to kind of that breakfast meal where we have some protein, and now we have some more complex carbohydrate. We're still in that workout window following the workout. And then the whole rest of the day, because your body has been fed what it needed, during its actual activity, it's pretty happy. So now we're focusing on lean proteins. We have some turkey chili, vegetables. We have a side salad. We have, roasted vegetables for dinner, some fruit, berries. We have fish as another lean protein. Fuel for fire is just basically fruit and whey protein. So the whole rest of the day now is focused on those core foods. And that's basically how you would set up a day, fuel the actual training, but still reduce calories outside of the training. So I'm just going to check here and make sure I'm not getting any questions. Okay, I will definitely answer that question at the end. Okay, Janet asked a question. I'll answer that question at the end. Okay, so that's kind of the deal about weight loss. When best to do it, it depends on where you're at weight-wise. How to do it, never compromise actual fueling for your workouts. So even when you're training hard, you can, or you're in a race season, you can still focus on weight loss if you don't compromise the important pieces of, the pre-workout fueling during workouts and post-workout recovery. And then the rest of the day really focusing on, lean proteins, fruits, vegetables, not carbohydrate heavy foods, if that makes sense. All right, on to recovery. So we often get the question, what do you really need in a recovery drink or a recovery snack or a recovery meal? What's going on with this recovery stuff? Do you actually need one of those fancy schmancy drinks that we we hear about all the time? So let's talk a little bit about recovery and what the key components of recovery are, and then that will probably help you better understand what you're looking for and make your own good decisions about how you're going to handle it yourself. I think we've already established that you need it in some form after your workouts. You need it in some form. When you're thinking of recovery, think of the 3 R's, okay? The 3 R's are refuel. So basically, you want to replace muscle glycogen. Glycogen is just the carbohydrate stores in your liver and your muscle. So you use some of that up when you went and you trained. So we're going to refuel, and we need carbohydrate for that. We're going to repair. When you went and you did your workout, you caused some muscle tissue breakdown. You caused damage, and that's okay, because if you initiate protein synthesis in your recovery process with protein by taking in protein, then that muscle tissue damage is repaired and you kind of come back stronger. That's the whole idea of working out, right? And then you also need to rehydrate. So basically you lost volume through sweat and you need to replenish that volume loss with fluid. So those are the 3 components of recovery: carbohydrate, protein, and fluid. Most especially if it's going to be a couple hours before your next meal, have a recovery snack or a drink within an hour of finishing your workout. I always say the sooner the better, just get it in there and get it done. But definitely within an hour of finishing your workout. You're looking again at replacing carbohydrate. CHO is the abbreviation for carbohydrate. Sorry. So at 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. Protein, about 15 to 25 grams, maybe more, depending on the length of the workout. Fluid, about 16 to 24 ounces for every 1 pound lost during your training session. All right, so how are we going to accomplish this? Best advice is to keep whatever you're going to use for recovery, keep it simple. Do not make it a complex meal of any sort. And by complex, I mean complex carbohydrates, very complex proteins, high fat, that type of thing. Think of that post-workout window where you're again, I say take it as soon as you possibly can, but at least within that hour. It's all about quickly and effectively maximizing glycogen replacement and protein synthesis. So the sooner you get it in there in the simpler form of nutrients that you take in, that's going to mean faster, more effective
recovery. So what that also means is high amounts of fat, fiber, other unnecessary nutrients we want to stay away from, because all that's going to do is slow your ability to accomplish that quick and effective recovery process. Fat and fiber are two very good nutrients that we want in your diet. They're just slow to digest. The mechanism or the process by which they're digested is slow compared to a very simple sugar and a very simple protein. So keep those guys out, leave them for later in the day. And in your post-workout window, keep things simple. So let's talk through a couple examples, and I've given, these examples a grade. A plus for sure are the formulated recovery drinks, right? So these guys are the heavy hitters because they are exactly what we just talked about. They provide the three components that we're looking for: carbohydrate, protein, and fluid. And there's no fat or very extremely low fat, extremely low fiber or none in these recovery drinks. So nothing to slow down the process. And the carbohydrate and protein comes in an extremely simple form. So whey protein, usually, or if it's a vegetarian, like a vegan type product, it might be some kind of plant protein. And very simple sugars, just like what you would find in your gels and your sports drinks, that type of thing. So those get an A plus. There's a lot of different brands of them, that type of thing. A minus, something like a homemade smoothie. So you can do your own. You can make your own. But you just have to make sure that it has all three requirements. So add some form of protein, whether that be whey protein or a plant protein, again, if you're looking to go vegan. Make sure that protein is very simple, okay? A banana, a cup of berries, that type of thing, those serve as the carbohydrate components. Are those sugars as quickly digested and as diversified as a recovery drink? No, but they're not bad, right? They're not bad. And then maybe add some ice, and obviously that, a smoothie is fluid, so that provides the fluid component. Again, a bit more complex, but it still has all three requirements. Now, here's what you want to refrain from, and here's what I see a lot of: people adding nut butter or avocado or something like that to their recovery smoothie. That absolutely will make it taste better, hands down. You will like the taste better. However, nut butter and avocado, love them, great. Let's put them in the diet somewhere else, but they're going to significantly slow the digestion of the nutrients. They're going to slow down the process, and again, you're not as quickly or as effectively maximizing your recovery when that happens. Okay, so the homemade smoothie without nut butter or without something of that nature gets an A minus. Another A minus is low fat chocolate milk. Same thing. Chocolate milk has very simple sugars in it. That's great. The protein is whey protein, but it is also casein, because milk has casein in it. And that's a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit more complex and a bit slower to digest. You definitely want to go for low fat chocolate milk or no fat chocolate milk, because again, we don't want that fat bogging us down. So those are some pretty darn good options right there. Now we're getting into the maybe still good, but not as good options. B plus is the turkey sandwich with pretzels. You have the carbohydrate component with pretzels and the bread and the turkey sandwich. You have the protein component with the turkey. You need some fluid, definitely have to have some fluid in there. There's definitely more complex nutrients in this type of real food meal. So you're going to have more fat and more fiber to slow the process. Again, better than not taking anything, perhaps not quite as good as, a homemade smoothie or recovery drink, that type of thing. The protein bar, it's again better than nothing, but protein bars generally don't have near the amount of carbohydrate that we're looking for. So you're not satisfying your glycogen replenishment needs at all. Maybe even more protein than you need. So you're kind of getting bogged down there. Oftentimes have fat and fiber and that type of thing. So not really as good of an option at all, but again, better than nothing. And then finally, the chicken fingers and fries, that gets an F. And I've definitely been guilty of this after a race. You don't want your recovery drink. You just want to go and get some burgers and fries or something like that. But in terms of recovery, not enough carbohydrate, definitely way too much fat. Digestion will be slowed significantly. Just not the best option, obviously. So you got to be careful there. Here's my last piece of advice about recovery. You want to make sure that you find something that is sustainable, doable, and that you're gonna actually do. So if you look at the recovery drink and you think, no way, no how, that's not going to happen. I maybe will take it once, but I just don't like the way it tastes. Okay, then that's probably not the best option for you. Recovery drinks or recovery snacks are, to me, like strength training is. I'm a coach as well, and so I might have in my mind the best possible way for a particular athlete to strength train. But if that is something that they're not going to do because they don't like going to the gym, or they don't know how to use the machines at the gym, or, they are embarrassed to go to the gym, well, then that's actually not the best strength training, even though physiologically it might be the best. And same way with recovery. Physiologically, the formulated recovery drinks are the best way to go. But if you're never going to do it, then it's not the best option for you. You might like chocolate milk more. You might like, some pretzels and a cheese stick more, that type of thing. Vice versa, I think the recovery drinks are really nice because they're super simple. That you have to figure out what logistically is going to work for you as well. So if you're going to go straight from your workout, take a shower and go straight to get in the car and go straight to work, and you don't have time for, recovery oatmeal with protein added, that type of thing, then a recovery drink can work really well. It's very easy to deal with. So think of it from that perspective as well. All right, that is my story about recovery. Now we're going to talk about pickle juice. A question that came up is pickle juice, mustard, that type of stuff. Does it help with cramping? Is this, should I use it? Should I not? What's going on with this pickle juice stuff? Okay, so pickle juice, the kind of the cheater, the long and the short of it is, or the short and the long, I don't know what that saying is. But anyways, the short answer is that absolutely pickle juice can work for cramping, but it's generally doesn't work because of the reason most people think it works. So most people think it works because it's very high in sodium, right? Pickle juice is like drinking salt. And they think, well, I'm cramping because I'm dehydrated and I need more salt, I need more sodium. Interestingly enough, though, cramping is, like I said, it's often associated with dehydration and or electrolyte imbalance, but research doesn't actually demonstrate that so much. Research demonstrates, in actuality, that when most individuals are cramping, their blood levels or their serum levels of electrolytes, as well as their hydration levels, are normal. They're fine. So I'm cramping, but the sodium in my blood is fine. So it's not the sodium, it's not necessarily hydration that's the problem. So why do we cramp then? So if it's not because I didn't take in enough salt or I'm super dehydrated, then why am I cramping? And the answer to that is basically muscle fatigue. So your nervous system is going bananas because of muscle fatigue. So muscle fatigue increases the activity of these little alpha motor neurons, stimulating the muscles to maintain a sustained contraction. So basically, you're cramping because that muscle just isn't letting go. And it's all because of these darn alpha motor neurons, which are related, it relates back to muscle fatigue. So we say, okay, well, we know that pickle juice helps. It's apparently not because of the high sodium content. So why does it work? Um, we know it's not because of the high sodium content. In actuality, if you think about it from this perspective, it takes about 30 minutes for even a small volume of pickle juice to leave your stomach, let alone actually increase, the sodium, your serum sodium or your blood levels of sodium. Yet it often relieves a cramp within minutes. So it relieves the cramp right away, but it's not even remotely close to increasing the sodium in your blood levels. So it's not the sodium content. It's actually the acetic acid. The basically the noxious taste of pickle juice. That's the reason why. So noxious tasting substances are proposed to basically chemically stimulate a reflux in the back. A reflex in the back of your throat, and this relaxes. This reflex has been shown to decrease the activity of those alpha motor neurons that are going crazy, and that results in the basically the cramping muscle to relax. So that taste in the back of your throat, and in fact, you can try it. You don't even have to swallow the pickle juice. You can just get it in your mouth and get it in the back of your throat and then spit it out. That it stimulates a reflex, and that reflex decreases the activity of those motor neurons, and then the muscle releases. So that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty cool. That means it's not just pickle juice. Other noxious tasting substances will work as well. And so some of them, like mustard, works. I know some people ask about mustard, spicy mustard, vinegar. I don't know if you guys have seen the product Hot Shot. It has been used in endurance racing for cramping. Again, Hot Shot is just cinnamon, ginger, lime juice, some sweeteners, and capsaicin. And the capsaicin is the active compound in chili peppers, so it's hot. And again, it's noxious tasting enough. You get it in your mouth. It hits the back of your throat, and it causes that reflex. I'm seriously having trouble with those words. It causes the reflex of relaxing those alpha motor neurons. So pretty cool. You can try a couple different things. If you don't like pickle juice, you could try spicy mustard instead and see if it will work on your cramping. Now, I just have to have this down there because, I just want to make the point that just because dehydration and electrolyte imbalance are not necessarily associated with cramping, it doesn't mean they aren't important for other reasons. So don't go, drinking all water in your events because, we don't need electrolytes and fluid retention for cramping. So that, of course, leads us into our next question, and I believe our last question, which is sports drink. Do you really need it? Can I get by with just water? Can I get by with just water and maybe a little electrolyte? Can I do gels for my carb? Because we've already established that I want you to train and fuel and recover with carbohydrate. So can I just take in other forms and not use sports drink as my source of carbohydrate? And so here, I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, the answer to this question is yes, you do need sports drink. And there's two reasons why. Electrolyte. So sodium primarily, also potassium. And then you say, okay, well, I'll take electrolyte in my water. I'll just, put an electrolyte tab in water. Then why can't I use that? Because the second reason is carbohydrate. So basically electrolyte, so sodium primarily, is needed to help with the absorption of fluid. And at the same time, carbohydrate is needed to help with the absorption of sodium. So the moral of the story is you need all three components to hydrate and fuel: carbohydrate, electrolyte, and fluid to maximize absorption of all three. One needs the other, needs the other, needs the other, so that they're all maximally absorbed. And that's why you need sports drink. Sports drink contains all three: fluid, electrolyte, and carbohydrate. And just as a side note, you're needing a lot of carbohydrate to get through long endurance events. It's super nice when a fair chunk of that comes from your sports drink and you're not having to take a gel every 10 minutes to, get your 90 grams per hour of carbohydrates. Okay, so I'm gonna bring you right back to high school biochemistry. I'm gonna I think you can see my little pointer here, but in this little guy right here, I'm just gonna show you how you need water. I'm sorry, you need sodium to absorb water, and then you need carbohydrate to help absorb sodium. I'm just going to show you some little pictures. So this side over here is the lumen of your gut. This is the inside of your gut. This over here, this side where the sodium and the water is trying to get to, is your blood. So your luminal, sorry, your bloodstream essentially. So we know that sodium is absorbed from what you're taking in. So down comes the sports drink and the gels and things like that with electrolyte in it, sodium in it. And sodium is taken across this luminal border into your bloodstream by a series of a couple different mechanisms. Active transport is one. And on the next slide, you'll see transport with carbohydrate is another. So sodium gets over to your bloodstream side from your gut side. And what happens, we all know osmosis, water goes where the sodium goes. Okay. So we need sodium to actually absorb the fluid you take in. If you just take in water, you're going to be in trouble. Okay. Next slide then is now we switch sides. The intestinal lumen is over here. So this is your gut. And this is down comes the sports drink, down comes the gels, things like that. And now you have glucose, fructose. These are different types of sugar that they're in our gut, and we want to get them over to our bloodstream, the port of blood, because this is where our working muscles can use them. So how do they get there? Well, first of all, these are these little transporters that I was talking about before. So if you train with taking in a lot of carbohydrate, you get a ton of these guys. Your body's like, oh yeah, we're going to need a lot of these transporters. So your body upregulates the production of them, and instead of just having one here and one here, you also have one here, one here. You have one up here, one up here. So that's why training with, high carbohydrate availability is important, so that your gut adapts to it. But this is what I want you to see in this diagram, is that there are multiple transporters that need both the sugar, the simple carbohydrate, and the sodium to get across, and for the transporter to work to get it into your bloodstream. So you need the sugar, you need the sodium, you need the sugar to get the sodium across, you need the sodium to get the water across, or the fluid across. So they kind of all work. The point being, they all work in conjunction. And if you just take water, you're going to be in trouble. If you just take water and electrolyte, you're not maximizing your absorption. That's why sports drink is so important. So the next question is, I don't tolerate sports drink. I mean, I don't like the way it tastes. It's gross. And I mean, I couldn't agree more. After training for one Ironman, and doing all the training with the sports drink and you're just so over sports drink. And you finish your Ironman and you swear off sports drink for life, but it really only lasts until you start training for your next event. So when people say, but I don't tolerate sports drink, I often have the question, have you really tried? And I don't think that I can't overstate the importance of getting your gut adapted. I don't think people really realize that important factor of, if you're going to drink 2 bottles of sports drink at full strength per hour, in your Ironman, then every time you go out and ride, you need to practice with drinking 2 bottles of full strength sports drink in training. If you do that over time, you will adapt. And I've seen it happen in myself. I've seen it happen in many, many, many athletes. Upregulation of those carbohydrate transporters. That's what it's all about. Practice, practice, practice. And trust me, it does work. So that is it. I've probably already, no, it looks like I have 3 minutes. So I'm going to answer. I do have one question here I have a couple questions. I'm going to answer the first question, which is, I read an article today about an athlete in the UK who is running 100 miles over 5 days, ingesting only water. Oh, man. His goal is to provide evidence that the athlete can adequately fuel without carbs, burning fat rather than carbs. A focus on diabetics seems to be his effort. Your thoughts? So I'm not saying that it's not possible to do some of this stuff without carbs. It is definitely possible. What I'm saying is, again, go back to that performance-minded goal. It's not ideal. It is not the best way to get the most out of yourself. It sounds like this man is trying to prove that it's possible. That's very different than him trying to run his fastest 100-miler ever, right? It's not to say anything about, how he's going to recover from that effort. It may take him a year to feel better after running 100 miles with water only. It's not saying anything about what it would do to his immune system. So I'm just saying, that's kind of ideal. Diabetics, I'm not necessarily talking about diabetics. That wasn't, that's a kind of a different situation. But at the same time, not really. It's not really a different situation, because diabetics, while they have to manage their blood sugar control, it's more difficult than, the average person. They still need sugar as fuel. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of my thought on the 100-miler with water only. Okay. What if you exercise right before dinner? How long should you wait between your recovery drink and your meal? That's a good question. Honestly, that's a very common thing. So what I would say is, in that situation, I would try to get something in right away, like right after your workout finishes. And then there's not necessarily like a holding period or a waiting block. I would try to get in some simple sugars and some simple carbs, and maybe in 30 minutes time, when your dinner is ready, then you can have the full meal or whatever. If you give a little bit of time for those simple sugars and those simple the simple sugars and those simple proteins to digest and do their work without bogging it down with a complex meal, I mean, that's kind of the idea and kind of the goal. But there's not necessarily like you must wait 2 hours or you must wait an hour. I would just aim to give it a half an hour or so. And obviously your more complex meal is going to also help with recovery as well. So, all right. Any other questions? I've gone over my time. So if you do have a question, you know what? I did this the last time I did a presentation. I realized there was my email was not on here on this final slide. So I'm just going to tell you, my email is beth@thecorediet.com, and you can just kind of email me if you have any follow-up questions or anything like that. So I hope that you have a good evening and that you have very happy and fun fueling. Thanks, guys.